The next episode, which will be a bit controversial.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Well, how do I start this video? Sombra is one of the most hated heroes in the game, with a ban rate of over 80% shortly after hero bans launched. She was reworked twice within the span of a year, and that's excluding her Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 beta reworks, and despite that, she's my most played DPS and a hero I genuinely enjoy despite her questionable design choices. And because Sombra got second place in the poll from a while ago, and due to my confidence in this rework, I decided to have her as my second episode. This video structure will be basically identical to the previous one, so my problems with Sombra, spirit of the rework and the rework itself, and even though in the last video the order of the abilities that were changed were very structured, this time I will go slightly out of order for better coherence. Before I begin, it is important to note that just like with the manga video, I do use concrete numbers, and just like in the manga video, they are just a guide and take them with a grain of salt. Secondly, this is purely my opinion and my take on Sombra. If you disagree with it, that's completely fine, but please remember that at the end of the day, it's just a video game and please stay respectful because of it. Well, now let's talk about her problems. And yeah, she has a lot of them, so this list will be slightly simplified and will mostly focus on the problems that the rework tries to fix. Firstly, hack is just bad. An auto-lock ability which stops you from using your cooldowns, even though 1 second isn't actually that bad, with a cast time that is pretty difficult to react to for the most part, will naturally make people very frustrated. For this reason, I think Sombra needs less reasons to use hack and not more, because giving it more reasons will still expose the enemy to Sombra's most frustrating elements. Regardless of how much more nuance you give it, it will still lock people out of abilities, it will still interrupt, and it will still make people very frustrated. Therefore, hack should be more niche, in order to reduce the overall frustration with the hero. With a prime example of doing it is just separating her damage and CC completely, so she isn't reliant on hacking targets to secure eliminations, which became worse over time as Sombra became more and more reliant on hacking and hitting the virus to secure the eliminations. Now let's talk about Stealth and Translocator, since they are combined. Even though the idea of combining the two does make sense, and I understand the logic behind it, it is nonetheless very limiting. It makes Sombra very all or nothing with how she engages. It makes her very reliant on the one cooldown to do anything, which can sometimes lead to a bit of clunkiness with how her kit flows, like needing sometimes to stand behind a corner for a few seconds to wait for Translocator to come back in order to be able to do something proactive, especially if you had to cancel stealth early. Speaking of stealth, by itself, I think it's mostly okay-ish. However, I feel like there is a lot of potential knobs they can change, which the devs simply aren't doing. But I will say that fundamentally, the concept of stealth by itself isn't necessarily bad, it's just that the current execution and balance state isn't at its best currently, and giving a hero invisibility and hack is definitely a combo to say the least. Now for a quick round of small complaints I have. EMP is a very impactful ultimate, and that's fine, but it needs some minor adjustments. Her gun still feels a little off with the spread, but has overall gotten a lot better. I really like Virus, but right now there are many situations where you must Virus and hack to secure eliminations, and fundamentally speaking, you probably can play Sombra's damage in her gun instead of needing an entire separate ability for it. And lastly, her perks are not that great overall, with the exception of Controlled Escape, which is like top 5 best designed perks in the game. Well, that was a lot of complaining, so how do I plan to fix Sombra? Well, the main goal of this rework is to reduce the steps needed for Sombra to engage, instead of it feeling like a game of capture sometimes. Additionally, as tempting as simply deleting hack is, the main part of the rework will not do that, but even though I'm not deleting it, I do aim at discouraging Sombra from using it, mostly shifting her power towards sustained damage and mobility. With Stealth, I want to allow Sombra to have a more flexible playstyle by decoupling Stealth and Translocator, which will mean one ability has to go to have space for it, and if you have been paying attention to the small details, you know which one it will be. Overall, this rework is a lot lighter than what most people will expect, because I do think Sombra aged semi-decently overall, but I will include a different iteration to this rework after showing everything as a small bonus. Well, since I already spoiled all of the changes, let's just get right into the rework itself. Instead of structuring it like a Blizzard patch notes like in the manga video, I will divide the rework in 3 parts. First showing changes to her damage, CC, and more general stuff, then talking about the changes to her mobility, i.e. Stealth and Translocator, and then finally, her perks. So, let's start with not her gun, but her opportunist passive, which only requires one simple change. and that is the removal of damage boost on hack targets. I didn't want to completely remove the passive since I still find the wall hacks pretty interesting and a core part of her hacker identity, but the damage boost has to go because it encourages Sombra to use hack. However, this does not affect EMP, which still has a 20% damage boost, but to compensate, the lockout duration will be reduced from 3 to 2 seconds. Additionally, due to the lack of damage boost outside of her ult, Sombra's max spread on her weapon is reduced from 2.3 degrees to 1 degree, which is the same number as firing one gun with Mauga, and it's about a 57% reduction in spread. If this isn't enough, however, then increasing the damage to 8.5 or 9 can also be done to compensate. Now for hack, the cast time will be increased from 0.65 seconds to a number around 0.8 to 0.85 seconds. This is done to reduce unnecessary hacks on the enemies by giving them a higher window of time to react, and also because she won't need to hack as often since all of her damage will not come from a gun anyway. As a result of the unforgiving cast time, most Sombras, especially in higher ranks, will rarely use hack at all unless it is to quickly interrupt an ability, which achieves my goal of reducing the need to use hack as much as possible. Additionally, Hanzo's Sonic Disruption perk, so his health pack hack perk, will now either no longer override hacked health packs by Sombra, or both can now override each other. Whatever change you think is better, but one of these changes need to get implemented, since in my opinion the status quo is just bad and is heavily favored towards Hanzo. With Stealth, it is no longer activated by using Translocator, instead being moved to Ability 1 by default, or the Shift key replacing Virus. Most of its function will be similar to how Stealth was pre-Season 7, with minor exceptions like damage still not cancelling Stealth, the reason for it will be expanding a bit, and obviously still being temporary, so the fade in and fade out time will be reverted to match her old Stealth animation. Her cooldown is still 6 seconds, the same as pre-Season 7, and the max duration is still 5 seconds. However, I will slightly increase the detection radius from 4 to 5 meters. And lastly, the reveal time when taking damage will be reverted back to 1 second. Even though damage not cancelling Stealth is a bit cheesy, I admit it, I do think it's not that bad, especially with the bigger detection radius I'm adding, as well as in my experience, if I get caught in Stealth before or after I engage, I usually still die 9 times out of 10, so keeping it isn't as harmful in my opinion. Translocator only receives one change, and it's a tiny one. When using Translocator while in Stealth, Sombra will be briefly revealed to the place she teleported to for a very brief time, like a blink and you will miss it moment. And I have to clarify this, yes, this is modern Translocator, i.e. the Ender Pearl concept, not the beacon. And please don't get me started on why I'm not bringing back old Translocator, since this is a rework video, not talking about the design of removed iterations of abilities. And lastly, before I talk about her perks, I want to talk about her health pool. Even though Sombra has a lot more mobility than before now, she no longer has any burst damage and is now purely about sustained damage. Therefore, I'm increasing her health from 225 to 250, in order for her to better sustain duels without giving her any burst damage to compensate. Anyways, time to talk about her perks. But before talking about her minor perk changes, I want to talk about my goal with them. Basically, my rework encourages Sombra to use Stealth as an engagement tool, and Translocator as a disengage. My goal with the minor perks is to break that and encourage Sombra to do the opposite with both abilities. So, for Control-Alt-Escape, it will be reworked to now work with Stealth instead of Translocator. This will make Control-Alt-Escape a lot weaker, which is very sad, but frankly I don't think its current implementation will work with my rework idea for her very well, as much as I loved this perk. Meanwhile, encrypted upload will be removed and replaced with a new perk I call Swift Assassin. After using Translocator, gain 30% movement speed for 2 seconds. If you're like, hey, I've seen it before, that's because this perk was heavily inspired by Reaper's Lingering Wraith minor perk. For her major perks, I honestly wanted to give her something a bit more transformative than right now, so starting with Viral Replication, it will be removed since Virus is no longer part of her base kit, but replaced with a perk called DDoS Attack. Pressing Quick Melee now releases a virus projectile, dealing 75 damage over 3 seconds, so 25 DPS, and spreading to nearby enemies within 8 meters. It will have a 6-second cooldown, and if it is on cooldown, you can still melee like normal. Yeah, this is literally just me bringing back Virus, but as a perk and without the burst damage, and partly combining it with the already present Viral Replication perk. I like Virus too much to fully remove it from the game, and since there isn't any space for it anymore in this iteration of Sombra, locking it behind a major perk is the best way to keep it in a world where hack stays. For Hacky Packy, Adept Hacker, Healthy Hacker, yes, this perk was renamed twice. I originally planned to remove it and replace it with another idea I had, but since this idea ultimately sucked, the perk got buffed not too long ago, I made a last minute decision to keep it, but reduce the max overhealth back to 50. However, I still don't like this perk, since it just adds steps to Sombra needing to engage and is overall not very transformative, which I feel like is something major perks should do. Now time for the bonus, that is, another way to implement my rework. Everything remains the same, but instead of virus getting removed, hack is, and virus is now moved to secondary fire, its damage over time is removed, the impact damage is heavily reduced, and it now locks people out of abilities for 1 second, and all the other stuff hack is supposed to do except for the damage boost, since I already deleted it in the previous iteration. And landing virus on a health pack now hacks it for 45 seconds, the same duration as hack currently. However, this iteration will also require to come up with a new major perk for Sombra to replace viral replication. But this is not something I thought of since I didn't originally plan to include this part, but as you can see, I did ultimately decide to include it. However, as much as I personally hear a lot of people advocate for this change, I want to list some pros and cons of making virus into hack. Firstly, let's start with the pros. The main one is the fact that hacking someone is now tied to a skill shot and not an auto-lock ability, making the process a lot more skillful and therefore healthier for the game, while also allowing enemies to dodge virus. Moreover, the fact it is now tied to a projectile without any cast time will enable Sombra to hack people during a duel or fight instead of needing to start to engage with it. Now for the cons. Firstly, this iteration of hack will be uninterruptible. It is now purely a matter of whether Sombra can hit the virus or not, with the only available counterplay is to simply dodge it, unlike hack, which you can damage Sombra to interrupt it. And even though right now interrupting hack isn't as consistent due to the low cast time, I want to remind you that in my iteration of the rework, I do increase the cast time to a relatively high number, so it is more reactable. Additionally, turning it into virus will also allow Sombra to hack targets way beyond the 15 meter range limit hack currently has, which in my opinion is just not a good idea. Could you theoretically add a range limit to virus? Absolutely, but I'm gonna assume it won't happen due to me using the current virus projectile. Furthermore, if Sombra decides to use virus just as she de-stealths, it becomes even harder to react to and is not as well telegraphed as hack is in this situation, especially in shorter ranges. And the thing is, Sombra doesn't have any reason not to just start with virus, since this iteration basically throws the entire idea of making hack niche out the window, and there will be basically no downside for Sombra to hack someone with virus. And lastly, ability lockout is still seen as a frustrating game mechanic. Making it skill-based does not guarantee that people will suddenly now think that the idea of locking people out of abilities is good game design. Despite the amount of cons I name, I'm not strictly against the idea of virus as hack, and most of the concerns I named can be addressed. However, I do want people to keep in mind that this idea isn't a perfect fix either, and also has pros and cons. And I want people to be aware of the cons before blindly advocating for this change, especially if you now think the cons outweigh the pros. To summarize the rework, I'm giving Sombra 250 HP, decoupling stealth and translocator, increasing her gun's consistency and output, and in the main iteration, removing virus and increasing hack's cast time for better reactability, while removing the damage boost on hacked targets. While in the second iteration, I'm also removing the damage boost, but I'm also removing hack and turning virus into hack, but as a skill shot projectile, alongside perk changes for both. Well, this marks the end of the video. Just like in the Mauga video, I want to thank Lucigu for giving me feedback on my rework, alongside helping me with the design of the text walls. Additionally, despite having zero role or knowledge of this video, questions videos on the state of Sombra did inspire some of my thinking, especially with the whole removing steps part. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching and feel free to check out my Twitch in the description. I will say though that for now, I will probably need to take a break from producing new rework episodes, since school will need to be my main attention for the next 6 months. However, the moment I will feel comfortable making more episodes, I will make a poll on both YouTube and Discord. But if you want to have more concrete updates and personal interactions with me, join my Discord server. Thank you for watching and see you next time.